Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 51 of Dollar Dialogue from Grassroots to Goldmines. Today, we'll talk about the business of football and the show where we break down the biggest stories in global economics, markets, and money. So, today, depending on where you are, you might also call it soccer, but wherever you stand, there's no debate about this that football is no longer a game. It has become an industry, and it has become an industry for a long time. It's a behemoth, in fact. It's a machine that moves money, media, and minds around the globe. So first, let's start with numbers. $600 billion. That's the estimated size of the global football economy. To put that into perspective, that's more than the GDP of Sweden, Malaysia, South Africa, or even Bangladesh. Football isn't just the world's most watched sport; it's arguably its most valuable cultural asset. The FIFA World Cup 2022, for example, drew over 5 billion viewers across platforms, which is nearly two-thirds of the world population. And the 2026 FIFA World Cup is expected to also smash records around 6 to 7% growth, with more teams, more matches, and more ad revenue than ever. The top 20 richest football clubs in the world generated over $9 billion in revenue. And today, to put some perspective into the footballing scene, we have Mr. Davis Lee, who is a who won the most creative award at the Wharton Global Youth Program for showcasing the diversity at Evercore Group. Mr. Davis is one of the smartest, most intellectual man that I've come across a very long time. We're just excited to have him here today. So, Davis, is there anything else that you would like to the introduction that I've just said?
No. I'm very excited to speak about some of the economics of football. As you guys know, it's the biggest sport in the world, and it's really become a blossoming business capital as well.
Thank you, Davis, for the introduction. So, for the first segment of our podcast, firstly, it's important to address how did football become the empire that it is today. So, to provide some historical context, football was created in England in like the 16th or 17th century, and it's a very old sport. So football has always been though more than a sport. It has become an identity, a community, or even the Saturday afternoons with your father and the chants that echo through generation. But in the last 30 years, which we'll focus on today, something changed. The grassroots stayed, but overhead an entirely new game took shape. And that game, it was built on media rights and global audience and a digital attention economy that never sleeps. So let's talk about numbers. In 1992, when the English Premier League was formed, the B Sky B paid just 304 million pounds for 5 years of domestic TV rights. At that time, this was revolutionary. Football was just stepping into people's homes like never before. But fast forward to, let's say, 2025 now, that same Premier League deal that was struck with just 300 million pound is now worth over 5 billion pounds just for UK broadcasting. And add in the international rights and the global figure that exceeds 10 billion pounds. And that's right, it's more than just broadcasting nowadays. Additionally, there's also the way how global football clubs transform from local institutions into global entertainment brands. Manchester United, for example, isn't just a football team; it's a media property with over 800 million fans worldwide, more followers than most countries have people. And this is nowhere is this clearer than in Asia. In China, for example, Premier League matches draw more viewers than domestic games. In India, football viewership surged past $200 million, with young fans idealizing Mo Salah, Heung-min Son as much as Bollywood stars. And these fans don't visit Old Trafford or even Camp Nou, but they tune in, stream, and engage through their screens. And then now also there's like media giants cashing in. Platforms like ESPN, DAZN, Bell in Sports, and even Amazon Prime are now locked in bidding wars for match day access. A single El Clasico nowadays, or even Champions League final, can draw way more numbers than, let's say, Super Bowl. So clearly, football has now become a media empire. But the bigger question is, has football gained the world but lost its soul? So, Mr. Supreeth Nagella, Mr. Shazaib, or Mr. Davis, would you like to add on to how football has transformed over the years when it comes to global dominance?
Yeah, Arib, hello. Can you hear me well?
Yeah.
Okay, so Arib, I would 100% agree with you. You gave a good background into and a history into the history of football. And Arib, to answer your question, like has football like kind of losing its soul? Well, I think football, like the FIFA Federation, they're always trying to do things to increase their own revenue to benefit themselves more, and which is why the fact that the FIFA Club World Cup, which recently just happened, I know Arib, you were following it, where Chelsea won the finals 3-0 against PSG. I remember Arib, me and you were watching it together, and that club World Cup, which was hosted this summer, there was a lot of backlash on it as well, because like some of the players, like some teams, for example, Bayern Munich, they started their season at like back in 2024, like August, I believe, and now this year it's been July 2025, and they're still playing football and they're still not getting a break. So this tournament being hosted, it did get a lot of backlash because people were saying the players are not getting a break. These players are being used as machines, as robots, only to increase like money and profit for these institutions such as FIFA. And the fact that it was also hosted in the United States of America also had some backlash, I believe, because traveling there was difficult. And also, if you look at the stadiums, some of the stadiums, the group stages were quite empty. It was like more than half empty. That's why they had to reduce ticket prices as well. So it did have it. So there are some pros and cons to it, because FIFA Club World Cup, this tournament, it was the first time that was being hosted, and even though it did have a lot of backlash and people were saying it's unnecessary, it's just a tool to increase revenue for FIFA, it did have a lot of good comments as well, because some people believe that the channel was exciting. It was a chance for smaller teams from South America, for example, to have a chance to prove themselves on the biggest stage. So yeah, I believe, Ari, to answer your question to whether football is slowly losing its soul, um, I think some people may believe it is. The famous quote that they say that the game's gone. Some people may say that, but um, I believe that there's like two sides of the sword here.
Yeah, so to add on to that also, going back to the history part, there's been a big change in private and public ownership of these clubs. Before, it was just local areas where people brought their teams together, and but really in the past 30 years, these clubs have gone onto the stock market, and most famously Manchester United with the Glazers, who slowly built up a lot of private ownership and ended up taking it off the stock market and doing a lot of controversial things like onboarding all of their debt that they used to purchase the club onto the club. Um, and then public ownership as well, people buying shares, changes a lot of the economics of it. And then going a little deeper onto the maybe Middle Eastern funding of a lot of clubs, such as like Manchester City, you really start to see the equality and the soul of the clubs really change, because with some of these clubs being able to get all of this extra funding from just owners taking money out of their pockets, it changes it. The big guys keep getting bigger. The rich keep getting richer. With more money, they can buy so many people off of smaller clubs, and just increase all of their talent by so much. Like as we see, Manchester City has had some crazy talent in the past, honestly 5 years, just through being able to purchase everyone from smaller clubs. And then that means the smaller clubs have less talent as well. So there's really an inequality divide that starts to happen. And there's obviously controversy with that. There was something like 100 charges against Manchester City most recently, with a lot of the legal trouble, and the with all this purchasing power, it's really creates too much divide. But as you can see, also the rule makers aren't super keen on enforcing them super deeply too. obviously we all know Manchester City and stuff are spending way too much, and this is not financial fair play, FFP. But the rule organizations are not willing to jump on it super quickly because they also they also want them all the players to be at Manchester City, to be in the Premier League, right? Because then you get more viewership, and so it's really a lawful divide, and there's a lot of controversy around it, trying to keep football, because then there's an extreme where all of the best players are just on 4 teams, and then where the small clubs, what are they supposed to do to keep up? Really nothing. So it gets difficult with the whole where's the soul. But at the same time, as you said, football viewership keeps going up. And with a lot of good teams, there's a lot of very good games. And so fans are still enjoying it. So whether football has lost its soul or not, I don't know if you can depend it purely on economics and purely on money spending. But equality has definitely taken a lot of changes in the recent past. And whether that can decide its soul or not, I'm not sure, but it's definitely taken on a lot of changes.
Yeah, I'd agree, Davis. And adding on to you, like, there are a lot of like harsh comments on like these Middle Eastern uh, on owned clubs. For example, even Newcastle was recently purchased by a Saudi team. And then also I believe City, Newcastle, and PSG is also run by a Qatari. And so it does have a lot of negative backlash because, as you'd mentioned, that their finances, they have way more. Their purchasing power is way higher. They have way more resources to go and buy better players, and of course smaller teams suffer because they don't have the funding. That's why like it really does vary because like teams in the Bundesliga, for example, German teams, there's like a rule called, like, I believe it's the 50+1 rule, and this rule mandates that the club's members, which are typically the supporters, must hold at least 50% plus one share of the club's voting rights, and this ensures that they maintain majority control. And this rule is in place to protect fan ownership and it prevents outside investors from taking over. So it kind of shows how things are more even in the back in Germany, but teams in the Premier League, which we've seen, and also like you mentioned, that the United is run by the Glazers. I saw that recently. Like a year ago or something, when when a Qatari person tried to buy Man United, some people were on board, of course, because of the investments that the Qataris would have, but some people were also against it because they wouldn't want their club to be owned by like a Middle Eastern to be owned by a Middle Eastern person, because then you could say that the soul of the club is gone. So yeah, it does have pros and cons, and it does definitely have two sides. Yeah, and Supreet, your hand is raised.
Thank you, Shazay, for such insightful thoughts added to this discussion. But before we get deep into football's business empire today, I also wanted to take it back to a moment that changed literally everything. And this was the Bosman ruling in 1995. It was one of the biggest turning points in football history, and most fans don't even realize it ever happened or existed. Because back then, football worked completely differently. Let's say you were a professional player in the early 90s. Even if your contract expired, you still couldn't leave your club freely. The club could literally hold you back unless another team paid a transfer fee. It's like you finished your job contract, but your boss refused to let you leave unless someone else paid for you. Imagine that happening today. It would be chaos. So this was exactly what happened to Jean-Marc Bosman, a Belgian midfielder. In 1990, his contract with RFC expired, and he wanted to move to a French club called Dunkerque. But Liège said, "Nah, we're not letting you go unless Dunkerque paid us." So Bosman was stuck. His wages were cut by 75%, and no one would sign him because of the transfer fee demand. So what did he do? He took his club to court. not just in Belgium, but all the way to the European Court of Justice. And after 5 years of legal battles, the court finally ruled in Bosman's favor in December 1995. And the decision, it changed football forever, because they first mandated that players were free to move to any club once their contract ended, and that no transfer fee was needed. Secondly, they also got rid of rules limiting the number of foreign EU players in a team. Because before that, if you were from another European country, clubs could literally block you just for being foreign, even if you were the better player. And this completely changed football forever, because uh, because players suddenly had real power. They could wait out their contracts, leave for free, and negotiate better deals. And this led to massive wages, huge signing bonuses, and a rise of player agents controlling transfers. It also turned football into a global transfer market. Clubs started scouting and signing players from everywhere, knowing that they could move across borders freely. And after the Bosman ruling, the floodgates basically opened, because clubs weren't just buying players from their local leagues anymore. They started going global. Suddenly, the best talents from Brazil, Argentina, Africa, and across Europe were being signed into the biggest European leagues, and the transfer fees, they started skyrocketing. And because of these crazy transfers and bigger players coming into bigger leagues, the Premier League, La Liga, Serie A, they all exploded in popularity. Sponsorships grew, broadcasting rights went global, and football shifted from a local game into $1 billion international business.
Yeah, so this is obviously a super major change. I mean, globalization, as we see with all of our favorite teams, is so important. Nowadays you won't see a team that doesn't have more than 5 countries and maybe multiple continents apart of players. And that's really important, because not only is it good for the club's success, but some players as well. As we see with maybe someone like Dembele, didn't have the best success on Barcelona, but as soon as he comes to PSG, it just fits better. Some players don't need to stick with the teams that they may be a country part of, but maybe movement is more successful for them. And also, it just widens your scope for so many things. I mean, let's say you're a club that needs, maybe you're Chelsea back in the day, and you really need a quick, hardworking CDM. So you go to Conte, right? Conte is not English, of course, but he fits the role super well, and that's exactly what the club needs. So it increases a lot of it increases quality of the clubs, and lets the players show all the value possible, and it really gives them more of a chance. Where Conte's from, maybe there wouldn't be as much chance for him to put in a lot of the value that he can prove and did prove. But coming to England, obviously he was such a star. Same with like Mane too. He was such a baller internationally, and he ended up doing so much with his success, building so many schools and stuff in Senegal. So it really makes more than just football better. That sounds like it was a very momentous change.
Yeah, I'd agree for sure. And Davis, like how you mentioned that a change of scenery is always like good for some players. When you mentioned Dembele, like for example, there's also Cole Palmer, who at City didn't get a chance to show himself, but when he moved to Chelsea, I think we all know how good he is now after he moved to Chelsea. And we all saw his performance in the recent Club World Cup, where he got 2 goals and an assist. So that move really did help him. And another and another thing that broke the transfer market and changed the game of football and like signing players forever was, I think, Arib and mine's one of our favorite players, Neymar, when he was at Barcelona in 2017, I believe, when he moved to PSG, when PSG triggered the transfer, his transfer clause, and his release cost, I mean. And I think it was about a 222 million, which is still till this day is like the most expensive signing. And after that signing, everything has been more, like every signing has been more expensive and cost way more. Like for example, I think Ronaldo, when he initially moved to Real Madrid, the signing was the cost was about 80 million, but these days, for example, and back then he was like the best player, one of the best players in the world, and Real Madrid were able to sign him for 80 million, where back in the day it seemed like a lot, but now to sign like a player of his caliber, they'd have to spend like 200 million at least, because like for example, Chelsea spent 80 million on Mikhailo Mudryk recently, and of course they're not on the same caliber at all. So it just kind of puts into perspective how signings and the transfer fees have significantly changed, have significantly been inflated after the Neymar transfer to PSG, and I'd say it kind of broke the transfer market. So yeah, Ari, what would you say? Your hand is raised.
Yeah, thank you everyone for their comments. I agree with all the aforementioned facts and statistics. And to move on to the second part of our podcast, I would like to talk about just what Shazib was talking about, the transfer market. So the question arises: when did players become assets? So football has always been about players, but somewhere along the lines, player became more than just investment. Let's look at the transfer market, for example. In 1996, the record transfer was Alan Shearer for 15 million pounds, and that was mind blowing back then. Because fast forward to 2017, I think Shazib mentioned this. PSG paid 222 million pound no euros for Neymar, and that wasn't just a player move; it was a geopolitical flex backed by Qatar's sovereign fund. And in 2023 alone, global transfer spending hit over $10 billion, the highest ever recorded according to FIFA. And Premier Leagues accounted for nearly 3 billion of that. But why? Because the player isn't just on the pitch anymore. They're a marketing machine, a brand magnet, and a digital influencer. A player like Cristiano Ronaldo or Kylian Mbappe can sway stock prices, boost sales, or even flood a club's TikTok with engagement overnight. But it's not just the stars. Across Africa, South America, and Eastern Europe, scouting networks and academy pipelines now operate like venture capital arms. They invest in young, sometimes at the age of 13 or 14 or 15, Kareem Benzema, and like train them, develop them, and sell them up the chain. And it's a ladder system from Ghana to Belgium, or even Belgium to France, and then France to England eventually. And behind every step is a cut: agents, intermediaries, and third party owners, even private equity funds. Yes, private equity. You heard me right. In recent years, investment firms have started buying stakes in football clubs specifically to profit off of player markets. Players are now basically like an investment portfolio. Their value rises with performance and can tank with injury or scandal. But here's the ethical dilemma: what happens when a human becomes a high risk asset? Stories are emerging, for example, promising teenagers with 5 year contracts but no playing time. Players are traded across clubs like tokens, even data scouting, algorithms that predict young players' future resale value based on metrics like sprint speed, social media presence, and injury history. It's no longer about the potential, it's about projection. And yet, this model still powers the game. Smaller clubs depend on the transfer economy to survive. Teams like Ajax, Benfica, and Red Bull Salzburg have built entire business models about finding, developing, and selling talent. It's efficient, it's profitable, but is it really football? Because when loyalty becomes a liability and players are like reduced to essentially balance sheet, is the sport losing essential? And there's also another critical factor. We're seeing that players are not paid enough, specifically across the gender gap. For example, there are tons of successful female women players like Aitana Bonmati, Alexa Putellas, or Sam Kerr, or even Khadija Shaw. There's like plenty of women footballers who are just as equally successful on the pitch, just like men footballers. However, there is this question about rising inequality when it comes to wages. So, Davis, since you presented inequality, no, since you presented about Evercore's diversity when it came across gender, LGBTQ, and across different other factors like ageism, would you like to shed some light onto this inequality factor?
Yeah, I mean, I think you touched the main points, and I think it's a lot of what the public sees in general. You know, obviously, there are these insane wages that a lot of these men are getting paid, and under the same corporations, you know, the same It's the same Chelsea, it's the same Manchester City and stuff. The women just aren't getting paid as much. So there's disparity that could become a bit of an ethical issue in general with some of these clubs. But I think a lot of them are under a lot of they're reviewing it internally, and I hope to see a lot of more changes in the future. But going to your main point of footballers seen more as assets in transfers and stuff, I think the best example is to take someone who has the biggest impact, such as Cristiano Ronaldo. As many people know about, when he moved the Coca-Cola off the screen and they lost billions of dollars in stock, that just shows the kind of impact that these players really have on more than just a footballing sense. He didn't do that by being very good. It's his what his name means. And to go even deeper, I think his Juventus deal is a very good example of this. He was signed for 100 million, which at the time, it's still a very big number. Um, but and Juventus did it not completely for what, because it was pretty known that Ronaldo may have been past his prime, how amazing he was, even though he was still great. But a lot of the reasoning that Juventus got him was not for his footballing talent, but for what his name really brought to the club. The club ended up bringing in their largest profit in the past, or I think in the club's history, out of the year of signing Ronaldo, even though they spent so much to acquire him, because of all of the jerseys that he would sell and the commercial revenue that it would generate. So the three main revenues that clubs make is from match day revenue, broadcast revenue, and commercial revenue. All three are greatly aided by a big name like Ronaldo joining. More people are gonna want to go to the matches if he's playing, buy more shirts, more broadcasting channels will want Juventus, and more commercial companies will want to sponsor them because people are watching somebody such a big name like Ronaldo. So that was a big reason behind Juventus's purchasing of him. And unfortunately, the club couldn't predict something like COVID to happen, and it ended up being a bit of a not straightforward profit in gaining Ronaldo, as the profit ended up losing in the later years due to a lot of COVID changes. And then there were lawsuits between him and the club when he left for Manchester United. So these are kind of things that you would never have expected back in early 2000s, 1990s. All these players having such economic and business impacts on these clubs. Back in the day, it's just, are you the best at football? But a lot of what went into the Juventus and purchasing Ronaldo was so much more than just his talent on the pitch. Even a couple years later, going to Saudi Arabia. Of course, now we know Saudi Arabia has their clubs have gotten a lot of traction. Al Hilal taking out Manchester City from the Club World Cup, and they've really gained a lot of global traction, and that mainly started from purchasing Ronaldo. Even though he was super expensive, and even though they could afford it, it was really a name getter. It, brought a lot of people's eyes to the Saudi league, and then that's a commercial way for them to make more money down the line, even though they spent so much for him and are currently spending so much. It has seemed to pay off quite a bit. So these players are thought of as more than just their football skill nowadays. It's really what they bring to the table in total, with a lot of commercial different revenues and economics in general.
Yeah, Davis, I'd agree with you 100%, because the Ronaldo example you gave was great, and adding on to it, I think not like Ronaldo moving to Juventus was not only beneficial for Juventus, it was also beneficial for Serie A, the league as well, because I remember around 2018 when the transfer happened, Serie A compared to the other leagues such as the Prem, the Bundesliga, Serie A's viewership
it was kind of decreasing. But when Ronaldo joined the league, it skyrocketed. More people started watching Serie A games. More people started watching Juventus. So it did benefit the league itself as well significantly. And not only that, Ronaldo moving to Saudi, it was I think like Ronaldo's the face of the Saudi project, and the Saudis really wanted Ronaldo to join because they also wanted to host the World Cup in 2034, and they thought that Ronaldo would be a significant and essential part to make that happen, since he is such a global and a significant name in the footballing world. Also, Arib, I had a question since Arib, when you were talking, you also mentioned that clubs like Ajax, Benfica, they develop these players, but they also end up selling them for a significant amount of money. Like for example, Enzo Fernandez. You remember him? Enzo Fernandez. He was playing at Benfica, and I think in 2022, he transferred to Chelsea, and I think Chelsea paid around like north of 100 million for Enzo, and of course, like and Benfica benefited significantly, but also Benfica were hesitant to sell. Also, like I mean, they were hesitant to sell initially, but when these big amounts of money come in, it's hard to say no. But not only that, in some scenarios, these clubs aren't willing to sell their players. They want to um, keep them and develop them, but it's hard to like prevent them from leaving when the players themselves are pushing for a move, so it's kind of hard for the players. It's kind of hard for the club to keep the players, since these big clubs are coming in and they want the players from the small clubs. So with this being said, Arib, how do you think it impacts these small clubs, and do you think there's a solution to this?
Yeah, Shazib, it's a very good question. So recently, there's like talent factories nowadays in football, or like football farms, and these are the hidden economics that isn't really talked about. So like in the football economy, increasingly being dominated by like super rich clubs, there are different kinds of success stories that are being written, but not on the balance sheet, of course, but in the youth academies of, like as I mentioned, like Ajax, Sporting, or even Shakhtar Donetsk. And these aren't just football teams; they're like talent incubators who are like pioneering a business model that combines world class scouting, elite player performance, and smart transfer technology. You mentioned like Enzo Fernandez from like initially Benfica bought him from River Plate in 2022 for just 12 million euros, and he played only 29 matches before Chelsea swooped in to sign him for 121 million euros in early 2023, which is a 900% return on investment. And also, Ajax, the Dutch giants, have long been the blueprint for development model. They developed or polished stars like Frankie de Jong, who was sold to Barcelona for around 86 million euros. Mathis de Ligt, who was also sold to Juventus for around 85 million euros. 85 million euros, and Anthony, who was sold to Manchester United for 95 million euros. There's also like Lissandro Martinez, Donny Van de Beek, and Hakeem Ziyech, who all left for tens of millions. And the result is that Ajax generated over 400 million in player sales between 2019 and 2023 alone, and they've reinvested the money into South America youth academies, also in data analytics and global scouting web. But the question is, does this model work? Firstly, these clubs invest early, so they often identify talent before players hit the radar of bigger teams. Also, like academies like La Masia, Barcelona, or even like De Toekomst in Ajax, and Seixal and Benfica have top tier development systems that focus on both tactics and market value. Also, instead of warming the bench at Bayern or Chelsea, young talents become starters by age 18 or 19, raising their price tags. Therefore, success is not defined by holding players, but by selling them at the peak of hype. Of course, this system has its critiques, like our clubs like Benfica or Ajax becoming stepping stones rather than serious contenders, or is the constant turnover sustainable for building identity and fan connection? And most of all, should football clubs be development hubs or trophy hunters. Yeah, there's no denying the economic logic. When done right, it's a model that balances competitiveness with a financial security. And yeah, I would definitely say that's the answer to the question. But moving on to the next segment of our podcast, which is segment three, where we talk about the question that most of the viewers asked in the poll that was conducted recently, and that was the Cristiano Ronaldo versus Lionel Messi debate. So to provide some starters, these are some of the most iconic and polarizing athletes in the footballing scene. In terms of Ballon d'Ors, Messi has more Ballon d'Ors. However, Cristiano Ronaldo leads when it comes to UEFA Champions League, as well as some of the league titles in La Liga. Also, in terms of Golden Boots, Messi seems to lead that, as well as international trophies like FIFA World Club. Stats wise, Cristiano Ronaldo leads in career goals, club goals, international goals, hat tricks, and games played. However, when looking at assists, Messi is clearly leading that with 100 more assists, as well as more yeah, just assist and like yeah, just assist and like playing style. Ronaldo's a physical powerhouse who's like known for his explosive pace, aerial ability, and ambidextrous finishing and unmatched athleticism. CR7, as his nickname is, thrives on the direct play, positioning, and goal scoring. While Lionel Messi is often dubbed the magician with the ball, who is sort of famed for his dribbling, vision, passing range, and playmaking. Messi is also often praised for his incredible finesse and football IQ. However, that's just their stance on the pitch. Off the pitch, social media wise, Ronaldo, if I'm not mistaken, passed 1 billion global followers, while Messi is lagging in that field. Additionally, Ronaldo's global endorsement is more wider ranging in companies like Nike, Binance, and even Ronaldo's personal brand. And influence wise, Ronaldo has become sort of the global icon, fitness, and brand mogul, while Messi is sort of known as the MLS trailblazer. So, who's the GOAT? There's no definitive answer, and that's the question that we'll try to address in this podcast today. So, if you guys would like to chime in and have a constructive debate on who the better player is.
Are you
Okay, so we can make this a little more conversation style, I think.
okay?
And I wanna kind of start it off with the Ballon d'Or whole thing. I mean, it's just crazy because like we talk about Ballon d'Or is supposed to be the best player in the season, and let's be real, it's not exactly what I would even say fair in many times. Like I would say they've been the best. Ronaldo and Messi have been the best player in the season an equal amount of times, and if not Ronaldo, a couple more times. If you want me to get into the specifics, I can, but that's not a statistic that I think is exactly fair to go off of. And then there's the whole World Cup thing. World Cup is a team game. You know, if World Cup really mattered so much, Pele would be the GOAT, you know? And then there's like, okay, well, is like Gotza on the same plane as Messi? Like they both won World Cups. It's it's a team game. I know you can say the same about UCL, but when you go into UCL and you look at the statistics, that's kind of when it's important. You know, he's the top goal scorer, top assister. Messi's entire World Cup campaigns are based off of penalties, right? Ronaldo comes up with hat tricks, you know, in finals versus Atletico Madrid and such. He's really such like a key player in so many of these major important games. Well, I feel like Messi, you know, he's just kind of there in a lot of them. You know, like he's obviously still such a important player, but you know, I think if you ask a lot of people, you know, Champions League final, second half, you can put anyone in to clutch you the game. They'll say Cristiano Ronaldo because Messi, you know, he's obviously a good player, but he just doesn't have that kind of instinct that Ronaldo has proven to constantly come out with. And then I like to think about completeness. You know, Messi is obviously he's a phenomenal dribbler, phenomenal playmaker, and he's, you know, great at stuff like free kicks and stuff as well. But Ronaldo is just he covers every single plane. You know, Messi has like what 20 maybe header goals in his entire life, while Ronaldo has north of 100. They both have good weak foots, but Ronaldo, if you see some of the stuff that he scores with it, it's really a different animal. The complete Ronaldo can also dribble super well. While I don't see Messi scoring the 40 yarders that Ronaldo is, and it's all around this for me. That's very important, and also just discipline that you see. You see teammates saying how much Ronaldo has impact on their teams. Like when he got injured in the Euros final and was super enthusiastic on the bench, leading his team to the end. While when Messi got injured in the Copa America final, he just sat on the bench and cried, right? And then you see what these people talk about in the training as well. Ronaldo's always up early, always first one to the field, working his ass off every second, trying to improve the team as much as he can. And Messi just kind of shows up, he's there, and he trains with the rest of his team and goes home and does his Lay's commercials. While Ronaldo's dominating. And then there's longevity, of course. I don't want to go too far, but Messi's obviously in the MLS when Ronaldo was scoring hat tricks in the Premier League. Ronaldo's still at a top level, and I'm not seeing that from Messi, even in such a weak league like the MLS. He has a couple of good games, but yeah, I'll let you give some of your points.
Well, I'd say that first of all, I respect both players massively, and I do agree with you how Ronaldo's discipline is this at another level, and everyone talks about how professional he is. So I do respect Ronaldo a lot because he also inspires me a lot to become a better person and kind of be disciplined like him. But we're talking about who's the better player on the pitch, and I'd say that like it has to be Messi because you said that Ronaldo's a better overall player, but I mean I think I would disagree on that because Ronaldo when he was younger at Man United or in his early days in Real Madrid, he was a more complete player. And at Man United, he used to play in midfield as well. He used to dribble a lot, but his game did shift. Even he himself mentioned that his game did shift a lot as he became older, and he like he wasn't into all that skills and dribbling, and he just tried to he was mainly a poacher, right? He was mainly a poacher, whereas Messi, he was always able to do everything because Messi drops deep, dictates play, creates chances, and scores. And Ronaldo's more of a poacher, what Messi contributes like across the pitch. And also that you said that Messi, the World Cup is a team sport, but Messi was the heart of the team in that World Cup run. And you also mentioned how uh, Ronaldo always lifts up Portugal's spirits. But Messi in Argentina, like Emi Martinez had stated that if Messi speaks, like people listen to Messi more than the president of Argentina himself. So Messi, like the entire team respects him. Messi's the heart of the team. Messi's the core of the team, and he leads the team. And he's the one who led them to the win. And not only that, his performances also were crucial because he had the most man of the matches in a World Cup and during the World Cup campaign and in 2022. And not only that, he's I think one of the only few players to have won the World Cup Player of the Tournament twice because he won it both in 2018 and 2022. So yeah, I think that speaks volumes. And not only that, if you like you say that Messi, like you were talking about longevity, but Messi has maintained elite performance without like changing his play style. And whereas Ronaldo had to evolve from like a winger to a poacher, Messi still plays as a creator, dribbler, and scorer at the top level. And also like Messi's game is artistic. Like his goals, passes, and dribbles are mesmerizing. And even Arib himself, I remember he was like saying how Messi's game it's just like poetry in motion because like even rival fans admit that watching Messi play is like poetry in motion. And not only that, if you talk about stats, like yeah, Ronaldo has more goals. I think Messi has 821, and uh, Ronaldo has Ronaldo does have more goals. I think like 50 or like 80ish more than him. But Messi's assists, I think it's 365, and Ronaldo's 236. So the GA combined is Messi's is significantly higher. And if you look at the matches, the GA per match, Messi also leads in that category as well. So in terms of efficiency, Messi is more efficient, and um, not only that, if you look at the trophies, like the total trophies that Messi has, it's um, Messi has 4 Champions Leagues, whereas Ronaldo has 5. And the domestic leagues, Messi, like in the La Liga, when both of them were playing La Liga, you can't lie. I think Ronaldo had 3 La Liga wins, whereas Messi won all the other La Liga campaigns. So that just shows how Messi used to dominate and Barca used to dominate Real Madrid at the time, where both of them used to play in La Liga. Because Messi in total for Ronaldo throughout his entire career, I think he has 7 domestic league wins, whereas Messi has 11. And even the Champions League, Messi has 129 goals and Ronaldo has 140. And assists, Messi has around 40 and Ronaldo's 42. But so we see that Ronaldo has more in both the categories. And hat tricks, I think both of them had 8. But if we look at their GA per 90 in the Champions League, Messi's was at 1.05 and Ronaldo's was at 0.90. So Messi is ahead of in efficiency and assists. So it just proves how he's the better player. So yeah. Yeah, Arib, how would you like to contribute? I see your hand is raised.
Before we conclude, we'd like to also hear from Mr. Supreeth Nagella uh, regarding this debate of who is the better player.
Personally, I feel that both are great players and they have both contributed to football's history. So I really don't like comparing people because they have contributed to this game in their own ways.
Thank you for the diplomatic answer, Mr. Supreet Nagella. Mr. Davis and Mr. Shazib Karim, I see that your hands are raised.
Yeah,
Can I?
Arib, before we move on, I'm curious to know your stance, Arib. I think, as we can see, me and Davis are both on um, other. I think Messi's better. Davis thinks Ronaldo's better. So, Arib, I think you can be the tiebreaker since you also watch a
I'm
lot of
very
football.
That's a very good question, Shazib. And like looking at this from purely an investment perspective, economical perspective, and at Wharton as well, we were taught to basically do like calculate anything based on empirical statistical evidence, and based on the statistics, purely based on the statistics. I think there should be no debate that unequivocally Cristiano Ronaldo should be the better football athlete than Messi, because first of all, he's 6'2", he's lightning fast, and his jumps are higher than NBA players, for example, while he maintains a 6 to 8% body fat in his late 1930s. And at 39 years old, he scored 54 goals in 2023, more than Haaland, Mbappe, and Messi, and he still clocks 33 kilometers per hour. No smoking, no alcohol, and 365 days of grind. Also, Messi is a magician. Ronaldo is a machine, and machines don't stop. As well as if we talk about the most global footballer ever, Ronaldo has scored goals in 5 different World Cups. Only player in history. Trophy-wise, yes, trophies in England, Spain, and Italy. 3 of the Europe's toughest leagues, and golden boots in all 3, as well as more around 900 career goals across 4 continents, as well as the most followed person on earth. Messi played 90% of his career in Barca's comfort zone, while Ronaldo he took over the whole world. And this is something that is also not considered the clutch when it comes to clutch in big games. Ronaldo's referred to as the clutch god, the king of the big stage. Most champion leagues goals ever, most UCL knockout goals, most UCL wins in modern era, most goals in UCL seasons, still unbeaten, of course. Hat tricks under pressure. Ask Atletico Madrid 2019, Sweden World Cup playoff, and Spain World Cup 2018. So we have seen that while Messi does perform in clutch moment, he does seem to fade when pressure mounts. For example, Roma against Roma, Liverpool, or even Bayern. And also the true national hero. This is obviously divisive, but in the Euro 2016 champion, Ronaldo carried Portugal to glory with a team of misfits. In the UEFA Nations League champion to 2019 as well, and he has the most international goals in football history, as well as the most international appearances ever. Messi did win the World Cup, but it was after Di Maria, Alvarez, and Emiliano Martinez. Ronaldo, he's been the system, not a cog in it. And in terms of the most complete goal scorer ever, headers wise, Ronaldo is elite. His right foot is also elite. Left foot, it's very strong. His long range is a rocket launcher, and free kicks he has 60 plus as well. And tap ins, he is a tap in merchant, of course. He is the best when it comes to it. So mentality wise, as well, Ronaldo was never built in comfort. So final verdict is, of course, based on simply the analytics, it seems that the better footballer is, of course, Ronaldo, and of course it doesn't discredit Messi in any way, shape, or form. Messi's still a very good football player, probably one of the best in the generation. But if you're talking purely about stats, and if we also do a DCF or even a DDM, the discount dividend analysis on this, the results show that Ronaldo is on par while Messi is overvalued. And this is, of course, through the discounted cash flow model as well as the dividend discount model, both of it demonstrating that Ronaldo is fairly valued or undervalued in some cases, while Messi seems to be overvalued in majority of the formats. So is that a conclusion that everyone somewhat aligns with?
Yeah, I think that's a good answer.
Mr. Shazaib Karim and Mr. Supreeth Nagella, would you also say?
I would argue, I think that's very debatable, but everyone has their own opinions. So.
Mr. Supreet Nagella,
Yes,
would you agree with the facts and statistics mentioned?
most definitely. Because I personally, who want to become a businessman, also know that you can base your decisions on emotions, but must be based on stats and statistics. And everything you mentioned is very valid, and I humbly agree with them.
Thank you, Mr. Supreet Nagala, for your agreements, and Mr. Shazib Karim and Mr. Davis. And to move on to the final segment of our podcast today, which is the financial fair play debt and the big club divide. This is something that needs to be addressed as well. So in recent years, something that has shown up very like all the time is that has the game been leveled or just rigged more elegantly, because when the UEFA introduced financial fair play in 2011, the goal sounded noble: rein in unsustainable spending, protect clubs from spiraling debt, and preserve the integrity of competition. In theory, the FFP was about fiscal responsibility. However, in practice, it may have done more to entrench inequality than eliminate it. Because at its core, the FFP requires clubs to spend no more than they earn, aiming for break-even sustainability over a rolling period. But here's the catch: what counts as earning is where the rich clubs win before the whistle even blows. For example, take Manchester City or even Paris Saint Germain, two clubs backed by sovereign wealth, Abu Dhabi and Qatar, respectively, and their sponsorship deals with state-linked enterprises like Etihad Airways or QNB allow them to inject massive sums of revenue into their books, often at valuations far above the market rate. It's legal technically, but is it fair? Meanwhile, mid-tier clubs without oil money, mega brands, or global reach struggle to meet the same requirements. They can't just conjecture revenue. They have to earn it the hard way through ticket sales, local sponsorships, and prize money. And the result is that it leads to a systemic lockout. The rich don't just stay rich, they pull up the ladder behind them. And then there's the creative accounting, which I was just reading at the New York Times, because there is now what appears to be a tactical play in the bedroom. Clubs like Juventus and Chelsea have used long-term amortization strategies to spread the cost of transfers over the length of players' contracts. For example, sign a player for $100 million on an 8-year deal. That's only $12.5 million per year on paper. It's finance wizardry that would make Wall Street proud, but it barely conceals the ballooning real cost. Additionally, FFP doesn't stop reckless management, it punishes recovery. When Barcelona spiraled into financial chaos, paying a wage bill that consumed over 100% of its revenue, FFP rules limited their ability to restructure quickly. Ironically, clubs in distress are often punished more harshly than those gaming the system. And also, we also discuss how these dynamics fuel growing chasm between elite and everyone else. Clubs like Real Madrid, Manchester United, and Bayern Munich now operate not just football teams but as global financial institutions with sophisticated commercial arms, real estate ventures, and private equity partners. In contrast, community-rooted clubs, whether it's Saint Etienne, Burnley, or even Dynamo Zagreb, find themselves locked in a competitive purgatory. Even if they develop talent, they're forced to sell early just to survive. The transfer market, once a reward for good scouting, has become a survival mechanism for those outside the elite circles, and fans, they're paying the price, literally and emotionally. Ticket price rise, over ownership feels distance, and loyalty is tested as clubs become brands and brands become investment assets. So when fans chant the terraces, are they cheering for a club or for a balance sheet? And it's a simply unsettling questions, because if financial fair play was meant to preserve the soul of the game, how did we end up with a system where most of the compliant clubs are the ones with the most creative accountants? And yeah, I see Mr. Supreeth Nagella, your hand is raised. Would you like to chime in or introduce something or just add on to the divisive nature of FFP rules?
Yes, of course, because the question that you pose is highly interesting. And when it comes to foreign investment in football, especially the huge inflows from wealthy owners in places like the UAE or Qatar, I personally feel like it's a double edged sword. Because on one hand, the massive cash injections have transformed clubs into global brands, elevating the quality of football and brought millions of fans new excitement and world class players. Without that money, many clubs might struggle to survive in the modern commercialized sports landscape. However, on the other hand, the kind of investment creates a significant imbalance and disparity. Smaller clubs with more limited resources are often left playing catch up. They have to rely heavily on youth academics, smart scouting, and player sales just to stay afloat. This can make domestic leagues less competitive and predictable as the wealthier clubs dominate trophies, TV revenues, and sponsorships. But this phenomenon isn't unique to football. If you look at foreign direct investment into other industries or developing economies, there are parallels. And for example, when multinational corporations enter emerging markets, for instance, like Amazon or Unilever, they bring much needed capital, and they create jobs and often boost local infrastructure and skills. That's a positive side because they can stimulate economic growth and innovation. But at the same time, it is true that local homegrown businesses could struggle to compete with these global giants who have deeper pockets and more resources, which can lead to market concentration and challenges for domestic companies. So, just like in football, foreign investment in other countries and sectors is a mix of both opportunity and risk. Because for example, it can bring growth and modernization through capital and expertise. It could lead to greater global visibility and connections, and overall more money could lead to more innovation and higher standards. But this also most definitely leads to unequal competition that risks local players or clubs being pushed aside. And this may cause a dependence on external money, which can be unstable or driven by agendas beyond the local community's interests. And obviously, this would also mean a loss of traditional identity or control. But in my view, foreign investment, whether in football or the wider economy, is neither inherently good or bad. Its impact depends largely on how it's managed and regulated. If handled transparently and with safeguards, it can lift entire leagues or economies to new heights. However, without proper checks, it risks creating concentrated power, reduced competition, and exclusion of smaller local participants. But how would we want to make foreign investment into such football clubs more transparent? Number one, there must be clear disclosure of ownership and funding sources. Clubs should be required to publicly disclose who owns them and where the money is coming from. This is mostly already happening, and this does prevent hidden agendas such as sports washing or even money laundering. And then number two, there should be regulatory oversight and reporting, because independent bodies should monitor investments and spending, and regular audits and financial reports should ensure clubs aren't overspending irresponsibly or drastically compared to other fellow ones. And number three, there should be fair and enforced financial rules. Rules like the financial fair play, the FFP, need to be enforced strictly and updated regularly to close loopholes, and sanctions for rule breaking must be clear and consistently applied. And then there should also be transparency in sponsorships and related party transactions, because big sponsorship deals linked to owners' companies, which sometimes could inflate club income artificially, should be disclosed and assessed for fairness. And overall, the main thing is transparency, because transparency builds trust, protects competition, ensures sustainability, and keeps identity intact. But it's neither inherently good or bad, because it could grow an economy in a market, but it could also stop and harm homegrown companies. And in the same way, it works with football as well. I see your hand is raised, Davis. Do you have anything to add?
Yes. So these are all great points on FFP, and I think they explicate it very well. But I want to introduce an interesting analogy that I saw a paper written on recently as well, and that's utilizing being analogous towards common political tendencies that we know of, and American sports. So as we see with American sports, just in this last past NBA Finals, for example, it was the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Pacers. The Pacers, if we would have seen 5 or even 10 years ago, would have had no chance in any later stage. But the way that the NBA is structured is so that it gives draft picks to the teams that don't do as well, and gives a lot of benefits to help the lower teams climb up, and maybe less benefits to the top teams that win stuff like the finals. That is obviously very different from what we see with football, though, where a lot of the rich teams keep getting richer. They're able to steal all the best players, and there's not a lot of super enforced regulations, even though the FFP attempts to create as much balance and fairness as possible. We do not see that as much as we do with, for example, American sports. And this is almost similarly analogous to socialism and capitalism. With American sports maybe thought of as more socialist, giving everyone, trying to create equality for everyone, trying to level out all of the teams. And you could say that's a good way of balancing. It's a good way of fairness. While the capitalist business in football is more about, if you succeed, you're going to make the most money through commercial and broadcasting, everything. And while that's partly true in American sports, also it's really prevalent in football and in the soccer world. So obviously the FFP made a lot of attempts to try to regulate that and create fairness all around. But as we spoke about earlier, that's not always heavily enforced. At the end of the day, everyone wants as much money as they can. And even the rule regulators have incentive to not enforce it super deeply, because if there's better players in a lot of these top places, like UEFA and FIFA UEFA especially manage mostly just Europe. And so are they going to impose some major regulation that takes a top player from Brazil over here? Are they going to stop that from happening just because it's in the rules? No, because that'll make them more money if that amazing Brazilian player is in Europe. So there's controversy and stipulations with all of it. And obviously football is so much older than some of this American stuff, and maybe that has to do with some of the rule implications that they added. But I think it's very interesting to think about the comparisons between the globalized football business and economics, and then comparing it with stuff like American sports, where there's obviously very different approaches to having fairness and equality between teams, and making sure everything's regulated. So, if any of you guys have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, compared to the leagues in US, it's very, it's like it's. I think it's super different to how like football works compared to how it is in the US, because as it is like usually it's draft picks um and yeah, you do lottery picks, and you see the worst teams in the league get to pick the number one pick, or like they get the top picks. But in football, it's just so much more global. There's so much more like different talents. There's different leagues, so much huge leagues, so many different teams. Like again, because in US it's just one league, like NBA, NFL, and so it's just one league. Whereas in football it's so much more global, and it's so like different. Even like that's why I'd say like there's no way that you can enforce the US football traditions to how it is in Europe or South American football, just because I think it just is I wouldn't say impossible, but it's just like near impossible, and I just don't see a way of that happening in football.
Thank you, everyone, for the comments. I wholeheartedly agree with it that FFP does need to change if they want to make football, like if they want to make football great again. So, as discussed in this podcast, football was once a street level art form, raw, communal, and emotional. And today it's a $600 billion industry, a media empire built not just on goals, but on attention algorithm and asset valuation. From grassroots to gold mines, in this episode, we uncovered how the world's most beloved sport has become one of its most complex markets. So it's no longer about who lifts the trophy, it's about who owns the broadcast rights, whose logo flashes on your screen, or even who controls the narrative. And TV deals are worth more than national GDPs. TikTok highlight reels are watched more than full matches, and clubs are building brand equity as aggressively as the ones build defenses. Additionally, we also broke down next the wage pay gaps as they're growing between men and women footballers, and between the top 0.1% of the players and rest of the ecosystem. And also that brought us to the heart of the debate of the footballing game, which has sort of plagued the audience for like over 2 decades at this point, which is Messi versus Ronaldo. We broke it down constructively, statistically, and then unequivocally who was a better player. And while Messi is the artist, the romantic, the prodigy born in La Masia, Cristiano Ronaldo, as stated through the DCF, discounted cash flow, and the dividend discount model, showed that he is the machine, the builder, and the evolution. And he didn't just play the game; he sort of also became the archetype, the prototype of what a modern footballer should even be in the first place. And also, we also lastly touched based on financial fair play, as it was sold as shield against chaos. What we found was a system that enforces balance in the name, but also enables imbalance in the structure. And wealthy clubs, as we saw, inflate sponsorship deals, exploit amortization tricks, and build financial empires behind the legal walls. So with that being said, is there any new ideas or any concluding words that any of you guys would like to say before we depart?
No, I mean, I hope everyone watching who's very interested in the background economics of football was able to get a little bit informed on some different perspectives of ours on how the economics of football really do work. I really enjoyed being on. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Davis, for being on the podcast today. It was very great, and congratulations once again on winning the most creative award at Watching Global Youth Program. So, viewers, this is all for today. As we broke down the football, how it's more than just a sport; it's an economy in and of itself. Its GDP is bigger than its revenue is bigger than some of the GDP of some of the growing or even developed countries. So that was all for today, and this has been Dollar Dialogue, episode 51, which was pertaining football. and how it transformed from grassroots to gold mines, the business of football, with our guest speaker, Mr. Davis Lee from California. So thanks for tuning in. The real game just begun. And stay tuned for another episode with another very interesting topic with another very interesting guest speaker. That is all for today, and goodbye, viewers.